Disclosure. So, now that we've read the letter, let's be clear on a few things. Earlier you told me that you weren't looking for answers anymore. What changed? Well, sometimes you go looking for answers, and other times, answers come looking to find you. Unfortunately, this is one of those times. The obituary. Jesse Davies, age 20. Living unselfishly as he died unselfishly. Keeping others from suffering. You will be forever missed. There wasn't a lot of room on the obituary page of the paper of the day we had the funeral. I didn't need that much room anyway. All I put was what we had engraved on his tombstone. It was easy to sum up Jesse's personality in the epitaph. Even if you weren't his mother. Cole tried periodically to find the cursed hack with no success. I was worried about him. For a while, he was taking his brother's death very hard, to the point that he started skipping school. He told me he was going, but when I confronted him about it, something just told me that he wasn't being real with me. I tried to tell him that junior year was the most important year for getting into good colleges, but it had little effect on his behavior. I've worked with kids to know what happens if he becomes truant. It's something I need to keep an eye on, and if I was completely honest with myself, I was grateful for the distraction. I kept putting it off, but I knew it was finally time to go get Jesse's things from his room up at the college. This time, I mentally prepared myself for the dog. Still unsure exactly what happened between it and Jesse and why in the world is the dog still alive. Thinking back to the letter, I realized that the dog being alive wasn't strange, but how it died in the first place, that was strange. The letter gave no indication to how the dog kicked the bucket, and chances that the owner of it, no less, couldn't find the cause of death were slim to none. I pulled into the small parking lot, went up to the door to one of its housemates let me in before I even knocked. As I passed into the house, I noticed that he looked visibly distraught, even more so than the other people there. He wouldn't make eye contact with me. For the moment, I ignored him. It took me an hour or so to get everything packed into the van. Jesse was always a minimalist when it concerned his material possessions. But finding all the knickknacks hidden around his desk took me longer than I thought. As I was taking the last box out, the young man who let me in approached me. Miss Davis? He stuttered. He looked even worse than before, almost to the point of actual physical pain. It was obvious that something was wrong. When we found Jesse, we weren't able to find a note. Did he happen to leave one with you? He choked back a sob at the end. Was this guilt? Yes, he mailed one to me, I replied, not really wanting to go further into detail, but knowing at the same time that it was probably inevitable. This is going to sound like a horrible question, but did he say why he committed suicide? Yes, why do you ask? I queried. I wasn't sure. I really wanted to know, but for his sake, I thought I might at least talk him through whatever was bothering him. Well, we got into a huge fight the night before. Things were said on both sides that shouldn't have been said. And we both stormed out, angry, without apologizing. And you think that whatever you might have said caused his suicide? He nodded shakily. Let me save you the worry. You weren't the reason. I wish it were that simple. He looked relieved, which annoyed me even more than it should have. And the fighting, that certainly doesn't sound like him. He rarely got in the fights. Barely even raised his voice. Oh, I know. He was the friendliest people I've ever met. If you want my personal opinion, I think it was the stress from his classes. He was an unusually hard task load. I've been there too. It seems like the walls are closing in, getting ready to crush you. And then you just snap. I froze. Something about the way he said that made me shiver. Like he knew about the hack Jesse played that led to his death. Yeah, I said, narrowing my eyes. I was in college once too. By the way, I love your dog, I said to the owner dryly. I couldn't have gotten out of there any faster. I now had to contend with the possibility that the letter was not written by my son, but rather his housemates, in order to cover up an elaborate prank gone wrong. Programming a ROM hack with a one change level, it didn't seem too hard. I know from previous letters that there was a computer science major living in his house, and the vet would know what drugs to give the dog to make it seem like the dog's heart stopped beating. I thought that his housemates might have had a hand in his death. Didn't help my mood. I even snapped at Kyle a few times about his prolonged and frequent absences from school. I hadn't gotten any calls from the school yet, but it was only a matter of time before they would come asking why Kyle wasn't getting into school, and if there were any concerns with home keeping him from school. That would also make foster care a very real possibility. If that inquiry ever came, I'm not sure that I would pass it. Maybe a week ago, but now I was less than certain, and it scared me a great deal. My psychology was taking shaky steps towards a cliff. A few days later, I received a mysterious email from someone named Melissa. That helped me regain some of my bearings. Mrs. Davis, I read in the papers about your son's death. I'm sorry for your loss. From the sound of it, he must have had a hard choice to make. You're probably searching for answers, and believe it or not, I might actually have a few for you. If you want to know more, let me know. Melissa. At the bottom of the email, there was an address, which I assumed was where she lived. Normally, this was the type of email I wouldn't even bother replying to, or even paying attention to, but I had to know if Melissa was serious. I decided to visit the address the next day without telling her, so if her story was bull, she would have time to get her story straight, and I would be able to tell rather than throwing her off guard. I was the one thrown off guard. When I arrived, the last thing I was expecting was a psychiatric ward. I walked up to the receptionist, wondering how I was going to get permission to see Melissa. Typically, only family is allowed to see patients, and even then, only during certain hours. I'm here to see Melissa. It was meant as a statement, but came out as a question. I was praying that I timed the visiting hours right. Oh, okay. I'm going to need you to sign in and check in the sheet. Just like that? The security really that thin here? Ma'am, the receptionist replied, with a waving hand that signaled me to follow her. This is a voluntary psych ward. No one's here unless they choose to be, and friends as well as family can visit them. Typically, our patients are a danger to themselves rather than other people. And besides, she finished as she opened the door to what I assumed was Melissa's room. Melissa told me to expect you. I went into the room, and the first thing I noticed was it was empty, except for the bed and the person on it. I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't entirely sure you'd come. Until I got here, I wasn't sure either, I replied sheepishly. But you promised answers, and I need them. So, I can put this whole thing behind me and move on. She shook her head. Sorry, but these won't be the type of answers that solve all your problems. They might even create new ones. I'm not sure if I can take any more of those answers. I was getting frustrated with how many answers led to more questions. If it helps, you should know that the questions will find their answers eventually. I thought I'd smile, but it felt more of a grimace. I just need the answers, not to come from a psych ward patient. First things first, did you get the note? I nodded. I handed it to her. I figured she would ask for it, and it helps to be prepared. After glancing at it for a minute, she started smiling, and tears rolling down her face. She mouthed the words, I'm not crazy. But no sound came out. I gave her a moment to collect herself. Well, I can tell you for a fact that the hack he talked about exists. I wasn't surprised. I was convinced at that point that there was one, even if it was just a prank hack. At least it confirmed that Jesse wasn't crazy. What do you know about the hack? I asked, afraid. At the same time, not caring about my desperation was starting to show. Oh, I have no idea why the hack exists, but I know what it does. It's basically... She paused. I'm trying to find the right words. Well, think of it as a guilt trip from hell. It takes a particularly traumatic experience and it feeds it back to you again and again until you feel like you're hurting people and it's all you'll ever do. It becomes your fate. At least it became his. Can I assume that Jesse wasn't a very defiant person? I thought for a moment. No, Jesse wasn't the type to break the rules. But he probably felt stuck in the same pattern, cornered by the hack and its effects. Me, I was way different. I bent the rules, almost always, and broke them completely when I felt more rebellious than normal. My main method of rebellion was sleeping around, especially in college. One night fling, my girlfriend walked in on us. She lost it. She started breaking down, throwing things, even threatened to kill us if I didn't leave. So I did. The next day, I began seeing all of the guys I was with being murdered by their jealous girlfriends. It didn't help that it was my fault. I was close to losing it and ending it. But I checked myself in here, determined to beat what was happening to me, to escape my so-called fate. In a way, my defiant streak saved my life. Do you think that these hallucinations of murder were caused by playing a hack? When I first read the letter, it seemed like a stretch, but now it seems more plausible. I'm more convinced now I was before you arrived. I had a similar story besides playing with people's hearts. I was also a gamer. Never got into consoles, but the hacks were easily accessible. From what it sounds like, the final level gameplay is different for everyone. But the objective is still the same, to run. In my version, I was Peach, and I was running with Luigi, falling a ways, behind me. And I felt, although towards the beginning, I couldn't be sure. I couldn't be sure that I was luring Luigi away from someone. I finally made it to the house and entered, only to find Daisy waiting for us. I'm not sure how well you know Mario characters, but Daisy is supposed to be Luigi's girlfriend, like Peach's Mario's. Some of this sounded familiar to me. Anyway, she has a gun, and she shoots Luigi first. It was horrifying to watch. Blood paint the walls, and with the screams clearly not in the game following closely after. This was something I wasn't expecting from a Mario hack. There was never blood. In that way, I thought to myself, you and Jessie were the same. Then she shoots me, and the screen goes black instantly. The only thing that happens afterwards is a pop-up with text that you stop running. I'm pretty sure you know the rest. So, the level is contextual? Based upon what I know, I would assume so. Well, that explains the differences between experiences. And the walls closing in, his housemate did say that he was under a lot of stress form classes, and you never stop seeing these murders. I still see them to this day. In fact, since you've arrived, I've seen 4, each more brutal than the last. The first just got shot, and the last was thrown into a vat of hydrochloric acid. I learned to live with them. I'm actually a month or so away from releasing myself and getting all of my life. Congratulations, I said as I stood and extended my hand. Thank you for your time. You've been very helpful. Like I said, I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm glad I could clear up some things for you. As I walked out the room into my car, I muttered under my teeth, you and me both. It took a few days, but things finally started to get back to normal. Kyle still wouldn't go to school, but if the school hadn't contacted me by now, they must have not cared. There were still some things that needed answered, but I finally felt like I had a decent grasp of what had happened. That feeling didn't last long though. 2 days after my meeting with Melissa, I was cooking lunch and Kyle was sitting at the kitchen table again, trying to find the hack. I just wanted him to give up on that. The last thing I wanted was to repeat what was happening to Jesse, happening to him. The food had just finished cooking when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting any visitors. Annoyed, I just assumed that it was a solicitor. Walking to the door, I had to think of a polite way to tell them to leave me alone. But when I opened the door, there was a young man, probably in his mid-20s, standing there with a suitcase. I didn't recognize him before. I could ask him who he was. He let go of his suitcase and reached out and hugged me. I'm so sorry, he said. I stood there, awkwardly, in his arms, trying to figure out who he was. Thank you? Silent pause. Are you gonna let me in? It seemed quite an odd question. I didn't know who this person was. He was expecting me to let him into my house? I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. He put his hand on his face, as if he was embarrassed. Man, those pills seriously did a number on you, on your memory. He waited a second, looking into my eyes to see if there was a glimmer of recognition. I'm sorry, it's still nothing. Jeez, Mom, he said, brushing his way past me and putting his suitcase on the steps. I know you're getting old and all that. You've been putting me through a traumatic experience, but even with those pills, your memory can't be that bad. It's me, Kyle? My throat went dry. I thought he said that his name was Kyle, but there was no way that was possible. Then who? I rolled around to see my Kyle sitting at the table just moments before was nowhere to be found. Running up the stairs, I burst into Kyle's room, hoping to see him in his bed or at his desk, but no one was there. It didn't even look like it had been occupied in months. Something was definitely wrong. That is it for tonight's story. I'll try to get out more later. Like if you liked it, dislike if you dislike it. Okay, Kumi out.